Don't you like your own birthday? So you need to see this. There are people who count the days for their own birthday as if it were the end of the championship. And there are people who, when the date comes, think, whatever. If you're part of the second group, you may have wondered if this is emotional maturity, indifference, or just accumulated time weariness. After all, when did that almost childlike excitement turn into silence? The curious thing is that, many times, it's not that you don't care. It's just that you learn not to wait. To lower expectations to avoid frustration. To give up validation and recognition before they don't come. It seems like strength, it feels like emotional independence, but deep down there is a story that involves emotional protection, past experiences, and even a certain nostalgia for the time when everything was brighter. Maybe your birthday today isn't about partying, cake, or social media messages. Maybe it's about self-awareness, about your relationship with connection, about the fear of seeming needy because you want attention. What if I told you that not calling might actually be a sign that something inside you is asking for a new form of meaning? In this content, we will explore, step by step, the psychology behind those who say they don't care about their own birthday and find out if this is evolution, defense, or a silent invitation to reflection. Because understanding this can change not only the way you live this date, but how you live the rest of your year. In childhood, the birthday was practically a cosmic event. We woke up already expecting surprises, cake, gifts, people gathered. It was almost impossible not to feel that connection vibrating in the air. There was a pure expectation, without calculation, without fear of frustration. The world seemed to conspire in favor of that day and, in a way, it did. As time goes by, however, something changes. The excitement becomes more discreet, almost neutral. What was once euphoria becomes an okay, it's just another year. And along with this change comes a subtle layer of emotional protection, less expectation, less risk of disappointment. It's as if the brain says, let's keep this under control. But pay attention, this transformation does not necessarily mean loss of emotional maturity. Sometimes it is just the opposite. But along the way, there may also have been a silent exchange. We gave up magic to ensure emotional independence. And there is the question that begins to echo: have we grown? Or have we just learned not to feel so much? When someone says they don't care about their own birthday, it may seem cold. But it is not always real indifference. Often, it is emotional protection built little by little, after experiences in which the expectation was greater than the recognition received. The brain learns quickly: if I don't expect anything, I don't get frustrated. And, let's face it, it makes sense. To a certain extent. Here comes an important distinction. Emotional maturity is not the absence of desire, it is knowing how to deal with it. Emotional withdrawal, on the other hand, is when you pretend you don't need validation, as if wanting to be remembered is a sign of weakness. But wanting attention on a symbolic day is not immaturity, it is human. The problem is not wanting, it is denying that he wants to. A simple exercise in self-awareness can help. Ask yourself, honestly, if no one congratulated me, would I really stay neutral? Notice the non-judgmental response. This small reflection already reveals whether there is a layer of defense there. And when we start to realize that, something interesting starts to move inside. The birthday works like a silent mirror. It reveals how much you still seek validation, how much you need recognition, and how you deal with the feeling of being or not being seen. It's not just about messaging on your phone, it's about what these messages represent. It's almost as if the day says, let's measure how your need for connection is going. Notice how small things gain symbolic weight. A friend who forgets can hurt more than it should. An unexpected message can warm the heart beyond measure. This is because the birthday touches a deep layer of connection and belonging. It activates memories, awakens nostalgia, and stirs that part that still wants to be important to someone. If you observe with self-awareness, you will notice patterns. Do you disappoint yourself in silence? Pretend you don't care? Or do you make a point of showing that everything is fine? This kind of reflection is powerful, because it turns the date into an emotional laboratory. And when we start to see what the mirror shows, naturally another internal strategy emerges. After some frustrations accumulated over time, the brain begins to do what it knows how to do best: protect you. It reduces the anticipation of the birthday, reduces enthusiasm, cuts any surprise fantasy. It sounds cold, but it's a strategy. Less expectation, less risk. Simple as that. But this reduction does not happen only on the date. It can spread to other areas of life: relationships, projects, dreams. Logic becomes standard. If I don't create expectations, I don't get hurt. It is a silent form of emotional protection that, at first, seems like a sign of emotional maturity, but which is sometimes just fear disguised as rationality. A practice test: try allowing a small controlled expectation. Something as simple as planning a special moment yourself: a dinner, a different experience, a symbolic gesture. Don't wait exclusively for external validation, create your own recognition. Because when you learn to balance expectation and emotional independence, you discover that feeling enthusiasm doesn't have to be synonymous with excessive vulnerability. Although this also comes with a hidden cost. Here's the tricky point: every emotional protection has a price. When you reduce the expectation of the birthday too much, you can end up reducing the intensity of joy as well. It's like turning down the volume so you don't hear noise, except that, along with the noise, part of the music goes away. And, without realizing it, you start living in economic mode of feelings. The brain loves efficiency. He prefers stability to euphoria. But life was not only made of neutrality. When self-protection becomes the norm, the ability to feel excitement, surprise, and even connection can become numbed. And then that posture of "I don't care" starts to look like strength, but deep down it may just be fatigue accumulated over time. A powerful exercise in self-awareness is to notice where you have lowered expectations the most. Only on the birthday? Or also in dreams, friendships, relationships? This reflection is not to blame oneself, but to recalibrate. Because maybe you don't need to give up emotional independence to feel joy again, maybe you just need to adjust your balance. Which inevitably leads us to an interesting internal conflict. There's a phrase that many people repeat on their own birthday: "I don't need anyone." And that's partly true. Emotional independence is a beautiful achievement, a sign of emotional maturity. But at the same time, deep down, there is an almost whispered thought: "I hope someone remembers." And there is no contradiction in this. The human being was made for connection. You can be self-sufficient and still desire recognition. You may not depend on external validation to exist, but still feel pleasure when it appears. The problem starts when you try to eliminate the desire just to prove strength. This is not evolution, it is denial. A simple exercise this year: try to communicate in a light way what you like. Something like, "I love marking this date, even if it's just with a coffee." This does not diminish their self-awareness, on the contrary. It demonstrates emotional clarity. Because true growth is not to stop wanting, it is knowing how to want without getting lost. And when this tension begins to become more evident, another element enters the scene: the silent weight of time. Birthday isn't just about congratulations, it's an official marker of time. It's as if life put a stamp on it saying, another year has passed. And along with it come inevitable comparisons. Goals that have fallen by the wayside, plans postponed, dreams that have not yet taken shape. The date, which used to be a party, becomes a small internal court. As we grow up, nostalgia also begins to appear. Memories of childhood, youth, phases when everything seemed simpler. This messes with our sense of meaning and can generate an uncomfortable question: am I where I imagined I would be? This self-evaluation is natural, but it can weigh when there is a lack of self-recognition for the achievements that have already happened. A powerful practice is to turn this day into a ritual of structured reflection. Take 30 minutes and write down 3 things that have evolved in you over the past year, including emotional maturity. Don't just wait for external validation, build your own growth narrative. Because when you learn to dialogue with time, it ceases to be a threat and becomes a teacher. There comes a phase when the birthday becomes almost an existential checkpoint. It's no longer about how many people remembered, but about the distance between who you wanted to be and who you became. And this comparison can be cruel if self-awareness is lacking. The mind tends to highlight what has not yet been achieved, ignoring the path taken over time. This is where many people confuse collection with growth. True emotional maturity is not in pressuring yourself, but in making an honest and strategic reflection. Ask yourself, what has this past year taught me about myself? Sometimes, the greatest evolution is not in the position won, but in the emotional independence developed, in the ability to say no or in the courage to change direction. A practical practice? Write a letter to yourself, as if you were an experienced mentor evaluating your progress. Recognize advances, validate pains, reinforce your own recognition. When you learn to generate internal validation, the external need reorganizes. And, curiously, this internal change also transforms the very meaning of the celebration. In childhood, birthday was almost entirely about external validation. The more people, the more gifts, the more noise, the greater its value. Joy came from the outside in. It was the other who confirmed his importance. And this is part of the development, the initial construction of identity and connection. In adult life, however, something begins to change. The focus shifts, little by little, to internal recognition. You begin to realize that it is not the size of the party that determines the meaning of the date, but the quality of your presence at it. Sometimes a simple dinner, a deep conversation, or even a moment alone, with true self-awareness, carries more weight than any grand event. This does not mean that you have stopped liking attention. It means that the source of its stability has changed. Emotional maturity allows you to celebrate without relying solely on the reaction of others. And when this transition happens, a curious phenomenon arises. Many adults begin to say that they don't care. But is this freedom? Or has it become culture? There's almost a social elegance in saying, "Oh, I don't care about my birthday." It sounds detached, mature, emotionally resolved. But if we're honest, this is often a sophisticated form of emotional protection. After all, if I say I don't care, no one can let me down and I still come out strong in the story. Over time, this posture can become identity. The person begins to minimize their own needs for validation and connection, as if wanting attention is childish. But denying needs is not synonymous with emotional maturity. On the contrary, maturity involves self-awareness to recognize what you feel, even when it seems vulnerable. A practical exercise is to observe your automatic phrases. Do you say "I don't care" before anyone even asks? Try swapping it out for something more honest, like, "I like something simple." This preserves your emotional independence, but makes room for healthy recognition. Because when you start allowing yourself to want, you also start to redefine what really brings you joy. Perhaps what has changed is not your interest in the birthday, but the way you understand joy. In childhood, she was expansive, noisy, full of audiences. Today, it can be quieter, more selective, more aligned with your personal meaning. This is not loss, it is emotional refinement over time. Emotional maturity transforms euphoria into presence. Instead of needing dozens of messages to feel validation, you can find recognition in a sincere gesture, a deep conversation, or even a moment of conscious solitude. Joy ceases to be social performance and becomes internal coherence. And that has a lot to do with self-awareness. A practical suggestion: instead of asking who will remember, ask how do I want to feel this day. Plan something that strengthens your connection with yourself, a new experience, a symbolic ritual, a strategic break. True emotional independence doesn't eliminate the desire to be remembered, it just ensures that your happiness isn't held hostage to it. And this is where an interesting paradox arises. Here's the truth that few people admit: you may have developed emotional independence and still want to be seen. You may have gained emotional maturity and still feel a slight pinch if no one remembers your birthday. This is not incoherence, it is humanity. Evolving does not mean ceasing to feel, it means understanding what you feel. The paradox lies in realizing that the need for connection does not disappear with growth, it just changes shape. You no longer seek the same validation as before, but you still value genuine recognition. The difference is that now you have enough self-awareness not to turn it into dependency. You wish, but you don't beg. It appreciates, but it does not diminish. Perhaps true growth is to accept this duality lightly. Understanding that feeling nostalgia, reflecting on time, seeking meaning, and wanting to be remembered are all part of the human experience. And when you embrace this paradox, the birthday ceases to be an emotional test, and it becomes just an annual invitation to reflect on who you are and who you are still becoming. After all this, I ask you sincerely, you don't really care about your birthday? Or has he just learned to protect himself? Was this posture born from your emotional maturity or from an emotional protection that has been strengthened over time? The difference is subtle, but it completely transforms the way you live this date. Perhaps the invitation is not to go back to being that child full of expectation. Perhaps it is to develop enough self-awareness to allow joy without fear. Allow connection without losing your emotional independence. Allow validation without relying on it. Because true recognition starts within, but it doesn't have to end there. On your next birthday, try to do it differently. Not to prove something to others, but to rescue meaning. Plan a symbolic moment. Write down your reflections. Celebrate your evolutions. Embrace your nostalgia, but mostly honor who you've become. And tell me, what kind of relationship do you want to have with your own time from now on? If this content made sense to you, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. This way you continue to deepen your journey of awareness and emotional growth. Because understanding one's own mind doesn't just change one day of the year, it changes the way you live them all.